The year is 1479 BC. The sun, a molten eye in the vast Egyptian sky, blazed down upon Thebes, the city radiating with the heat of 1,000 hearths and the vibrant energy of a kingdom at its zenith. The air itself thrummed with anticipation. Today was no ordinary day. It was a day of celebration, a festival to commemorate the triumphant return of the trading expedition to Punt, a land of myth and legend, from whence came riches untold. Senenmut, his linen robes shimmering white in the relentless glare, stood upon the terraced heights of Deir el-Bahri, the magnificent mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, which he himself had conceived and was bringing into breathtaking reality. The scale of the project was staggering, a testament to the ambition and power of the female pharaoh. Colonnades of elegant pillars stretched heavenward, framing the cliffs behind, while ramps of polished stone ascended in graceful symmetry, creating a visual symphony of line and form. Senenmut's gaze swept over the burgeoning masterpiece, a quiet pride swelling within him. He was not merely an architect. He was an artist, a visionary shaping stone and space to reflect the glory of his queen. Below him, the temple courtyard pulsed with life. Priests in their leopard skins chanted ancient hymns, their voices rising in unison carried on the breeze. Dancers swayed and twirled, their bodies adorned with intricate jewelry, mirroring the vibrant colors of the offerings piled high before the shrines. Nubian musicians beat upon their drums, their rhythmic pulse echoing the beating heart of Egypt itself. The scent of incense mingled with the aroma of roasted meats and sweet cakes, creating an intoxicating atmosphere of revelry. The people of Thebes, their faces alight with joy, had gathered to pay homage to Hatshepsut, the woman who had brought prosperity and peace to their land. Senenmut's eyes searched the crowd, eventually finding the figure he sought, Hatshepsut herself. She sat upon a raised dais, regal and composed, her gaze surveying the scene with a quiet satisfaction. She wore the traditional regalia of a pharaoh, the Nin's headdress, the uraeus cobra coiled above her brow, and the false beard affixed to her chin. It was a deliberate statement, a visual assertion of her right to rule in a world dominated by men. Yet, despite the outward display of power, Senenmut could discern a subtle weariness in her eyes, a hint of the burden she carried. He had known Hatshepsut for many years, their bond forged in the crucible of shared ambition and mutual respect. It had begun when she was still merely a royal princess, daughter of Thutmose I, and he a young, ambitious architect with a keen eye for innovation. He had recognized in her a spark of brilliance, a fierce determination that defied the limitations imposed upon her by birth and circumstance. He had become her confidant, her advisor, and perhaps more than anything, her friend. Their relationship was unconventional, bordering on scandalous, in a society where royal bloodlines were paramount and social hierarchies were rigidly enforced. Whispers followed them, rumors of an intimacy that transcended the boundaries of courtly protocol. But Hatshepsut, secure in her power and confident in Senenmut's loyalty, had defied convention, elevating him to positions of unprecedented influence. He was her chief architect, her steward, her right hand, a man of humble origins who had risen to become one of the most powerful figures in the kingdom. As Senenmut watched her, his mind drifted back to the early days of her reign, when Thutmose II, her husband and half-brother, had died, leaving behind only a young son, Thutmose III. Hatshepsut had initially ruled as regent, but the allure of power had proven too strong, and she had gradually assumed the full authority of pharaoh, declaring herself king and adopting all the trappings of male rulership. It was a bold move, unprecedented in Egyptian history, and it had met with resistance from some quarters, particularly from those who believed that the throne rightfully belonged to Thutmose III. Senenmut had been instrumental in legitimizing Hatshepsut's claim to the throne. He had commissioned artists to create images of her divine birth, depicting her as the daughter of the god Amun, thus reinforcing her divine right to rule. He had also overseen the construction of numerous monuments and temples dedicated to her glory, solidifying her image as a powerful and benevolent ruler. The expedition to Punt, which they were celebrating today, was another testament to Hatshepsut's ambition and vision. While other pharaohs focused on military conquest, Hatshepsut had chosen to pursue peaceful trade, establishing lucrative relationships with foreign lands and bringing wealth and prosperity to Egypt. The ships had returned laden with exotic goods, myrrh trees, ebony, ivory, gold, and spices, all of which were now being paraded through the streets of Thebes, to the delight of the populace. But even amidst the jubilation, a shadow of unease lingered in Senenmut's mind. He knew that Hatshepsut's position was precarious, that her rule was constantly being challenged by those who resented her usurpation of the throne. Thutmose III, now a young man chafing under his stepmother's authority, was a potential threat. Although he outwardly displayed deference and obedience, Senenmut suspected that he harbored deep-seated resentment, waiting for the opportunity to seize power. Senenmut's gaze shifted to Thutmose III, who stood a short distance from Hatshepsut. He was taller than his stepmother, his frame lean and wiry, hinting at the military prowess that would define his later reign. His face was impassive, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. Senenmut could not decipher his thoughts, but he sensed a suppressed energy, a coiled spring ready to unleash its force. The junior co-regent offered the illusion of respect, but those close to the court knew the truth. Since the death of his father, Thutmose II, he had been relegated to the role of a symbolic figurehead, forced to stand aside while his stepmother wielded absolute power. He had been given command of the army, yes, but his victories were often downplayed, his achievements overshadowed by Hatshepsut's grand building projects and her focus on peaceful trade. The whispers had begun years ago, subtle at first, barely audible above the din of the court, doubts about Hatshepsut's legitimacy, murmurs of discontent among the military elite, veiled criticisms of her unconventional rule. Senenmut had dismissed them as the grumblings of malcontents, the inevitable consequence of any exercise of power. But lately, the whispers had grown louder, more persistent, fueled by Thutmose III's growing impatience and the resentment of those who believed that a woman had no place on the throne of Egypt. Senenmut knew that Hatshepsut was aware of the danger. She had surrounded herself with loyal advisors and maintained a strong grip on the reins of power. But he also knew that she was weary, that the constant struggle to maintain her position had taken its toll. She longed for peace, for a time when she could relinquish the burdens of rulership and devote herself to the construction of her magnificent temple, her lasting legacy. As the celebration continued, Senenmut watched the interplay between Hatshepsut and Thutmose III with a keen eye, searching for any sign of open conflict. He saw none, only the carefully constructed facade of mutual respect and cooperation. But beneath the surface he sensed a simmering tension, a silent battle of wills that threatened to erupt at any moment. He knew that he had a crucial role to play in maintaining the delicate balance of power. His loyalty to Hatshepsut was unwavering, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to protect her and her reign. But he also knew that the future was uncertain, that the sands of time were constantly shifting, and that even the most powerful of rulers could be swept away by the currents of history. He thought of the massive pylons he was erecting at Karnak, adorned with scenes of Hatshepsut's victories and her divine lineage. He thought of the obelisks he was raising, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the sun's rays, proclaiming her glory to the world. He thought of the countless statues he was commissioning, each one a perfect likeness of the queen, a testament to her beauty and her power. He knew that these monuments were not merely works of art, they were acts of defiance, a bold statement that Hatshepsut's reign would not be forgotten. He was determined to ensure that her legacy would endure, that her name would be etched in the annals of history, that even the most determined attempts to erase her from memory would ultimately fail. He glanced back at Hatshepsut, who was now accepting tributes from the assembled dignitaries. Her face was serene, her gaze unwavering. He knew that she was aware of the risks, that she understood the precariousness of her position, but she was also resolute, determined to rule justly and wisely, to bring peace and prosperity to Egypt, and to leave behind a lasting legacy that would be remembered for generations to come. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the temple courtyard, Senenmut felt a surge of determination. He would continue to serve Hatshepsut with unwavering loyalty, to protect her from her enemies, and to ensure that her name would never be forgotten. He would use all his skills, all his influence, all his power to safeguard her legacy, to preserve her memory for posterity. He looked again at Deir el-Bahari, rising majestically against the backdrop of the Theban hills. It was more than just a temple. It was a symbol of Hatshepsut's reign, a testament to her ambition and her vision. And Senenmut, the architect, the artist, the loyal servant, would ensure that it stood for eternity, a silent witness to the glory of the queen who dared to defy convention and rule as pharaoh of Egypt. May this reign of prosperity and beauty be etched in the stones of eternity, that even the sands of time shall fail to hide it. Just as these stories unfold, be sure to like and subscribe to follow along on this journey through history. The air in Thebes, once thick with the scent of myrrh and roasting meats from the festival celebrating the bounty of Punt, turned stale overnight. The vibrant colors of celebratory banners faded in Senenmut's memory, replaced by the drab gray of mourning rituals. Hatshepsut was gone. A cough that started as a mere tickle during the desert travels had swiftly consumed her, a flickering flame extinguished by a sudden gust of wind. The official pronouncement spoke of a divine transition, a journey to join the gods. But Senenmut, standing amidst the throngs of weeping courtiers, saw only fear in their eyes. Hatshepsut had been the sun, and now the shadows were lengthening, creeping into the corners of their carefully constructed world. Thutmose III, for so long a figure relegated to the background, now stood bathed in the full glare of the royal spotlight. His face, impassive during the official mourning ceremonies, betrayed nothing of his inner thoughts. The first sign came subtly, a directive issued from the palace regarding future artistic commissions. His Majesty, Thutmose III, sole ruler of Egypt, it declared, desires that all representations of the pharaoh reflect the strength and virility befitting a ruler chosen by the gods. The implications were clear. The serene, almost androgynous images of Hatshepsut, carefully crafted to project wisdom and authority rather than overt masculinity, were to be replaced. Then came the chisels. Senenmut arrived at Deir el-Bahari one morning to find workers swarming around the lower terraces, hacking away at the magnificent reliefs depicting Hatshepsut's reign. Faces were being obliterated, cartouches bearing her name were being meticulously erased, replaced with those of Thutmose III. The skill with which Senenmut had overseen the temple's construction, the pride he had taken in its intricate details, now turned to bitter ash in his mouth. Each strike of the chisel felt like a blow to his own heart, a violation of the sacred space he had helped create. He approached one of the overseers, a man he had known for years, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. "What is the meaning of this desecration?" The overseer, eyes downcast, mumbled, "Orders from the pharaoh. Her Majesty's contributions are to be reassessed. It is for the good of Egypt, they say, to restore the rightful lineage." Rightful lineage? Senenmut scoffed. Hatshepsut ruled justly and brought prosperity to this land. What lineage is more rightful than success and stability? The overseer shook his head, fear etched on his face. "I cannot say, Senenmut. I only follow orders. Disobeying the pharaoh is a death sentence." Senenmut understood. He turned away, the sounds of destruction echoing in his ears. He walked through the temple complex, his hand tracing the outlines of defaced images, the ghost of Hatshepsut's presence lingering in the cool stone. He saw the fear in the eyes of the artists and craftsmen, their creativity stifled by the chilling wind of the new regime. The whispers started then, insidious and poisonous, spreading through the court like a disease. Rumors questioning the legitimacy of Hatshepsut's reign, casting doubts on her abilities, painting her as a power-hungry woman who had usurped the throne. Some claimed she had manipulated her way into power, sidelining the rightful heir. Others hinted at darker conspiracies, suggesting that her death had been less than natural. Senenmut knew these were lies, carefully orchestrated to justify the systematic erasure of her legacy. He had been at Hatshepsut's side for years, witnessing her intelligence, her dedication, her genuine love for Egypt. He knew the truth of her reign, the challenges she had overcome, the sacrifices she had made. The removal of Hatshepsut's statues was even more blatant. One by one, they were toppled from their pedestals, dragged away to be destroyed or repurposed. Senenmut watched in helpless fury as the magnificent likenesses of the queen, crafted from the finest stone and adorned with gold, were smashed to pieces. One day, he saw a group of workers struggling to move a particularly large statue, one that stood near the entrance to the temple. It was a powerful image of Hatshepsut as Osiris, the god of the afterlife, symbolizing her divine right to rule. Senenmut had personally overseen its carving, ensuring that it captured the essence of her strength and wisdom. He pushed his way through the crowd, his voice shaking with anger. "Stop! What are you doing?" The workers, startled by his outburst, hesitated. Their foreman, a burly man with a scarred face, stepped forward. "We have orders to remove this statue, Senenmut. It is to be destroyed." "Destroyed?" Senenmut cried. "This is a masterpiece, a testament to the greatness of Egypt." "The pharaoh has spoken," the foreman said, his voice hard. "His word is law." Senenmut glared at him, his fist clenched. He wanted to fight, to defend the statue, to protect Hatshepsut's memory, but he knew it was futile. He was one man against the might of the pharaoh. He turned away, defeated. As he walked away, he heard the sickening crash of stone against stone, the sound of Hatshepsut's legacy being shattered. The whispers grew louder, bolder. Thutmose III's inner circle, emboldened by the pharaoh's clear agenda, began to actively rewrite history. Official documents were altered, omitting Hatshepsut's name and attributing her achievements to Thutmose III. Scribes were instructed to emphasize Thutmose III's military prowess, portraying him as a strong and decisive leader who had finally restored Egypt to its rightful glory. Senenmut was summoned to the palace. He entered the throne room with trepidation, the weight of the unfolding events pressing down on him. Thutmose III sat on the throne, his expression inscrutable. Around him stood his advisors, their faces filled with suspicion. Senenmut, Thutmose III said, his voice cold and formal. You served Hatshepsut loyally. I trust you understand the necessity of the changes that are being made. Senenmut bowed his head, his heart pounding in his chest. Yes, Your Majesty, he said, carefully choosing his words. I understand the importance of stability and order. Good, Thutmose III said. Then you will cooperate fully in ensuring that the historical record is accurate and complete. You will assist in the redaction of any references to Hatshepsut's irregular reign. Senenmut hesitated. He knew what Thutmose III was asking him to do: to betray Hatshepsut's memory, to participate in the systematic destruction of her legacy. Your Majesty, he said, his voice barely audible, I am a builder, not a historian. My skills lie in stone and architecture, not in words and records. Your skills lie where I direct them, Thutmose III said, his voice hardening. You will do as you are told. Your loyalty will be rewarded. Your disobedience will be punished. Senenmut knew he had no choice. He bowed again, his face a mask of compliance. As you command, Your Majesty. He left the palace, his mind reeling. He had been forced to make a terrible choice, to compromise his principles, to betray the woman he had served so faithfully. But he also knew that he had to survive. He had to find a way to protect Hatshepsut's memory, even if it meant playing along with Thutmose III's charade. He started subtly. When tasked with altering inscriptions, he would find ways to include veiled references to Hatshepsut, using symbolism and allegory to hint at her accomplishments. He would misinterpret orders, accidentally preserve certain images, forget to remove certain cartouches. It was a dangerous game, but he felt compelled to play it. One day, he was assigned to oversee the removal of a series of reliefs from a small, relatively obscure temple dedicated to Hathor. The reliefs depicted Hatshepsut receiving offerings from foreign dignitaries, a clear testament to her diplomatic skills. Senenmut arrived at the temple with a heavy heart. He watched as the workers began to dismantle the reliefs, carefully chipping away at the stone. As he observed, he noticed that one of the reliefs, a particularly beautiful depiction of Hatshepsut presenting gifts to Hathor, was only partially attached to the wall. He had an idea. He approached the foreman, a gruff but somewhat sympathetic man named Amenemhat. Amenemhat, he said, his voice low, this relief is in danger of collapsing. It is too fragile to be moved. Amenemhat examined the relief, his brow furrowed. You are right, Senenmut. It is barely hanging on. I suggest we leave it in place, Senenmut said. We can cover it with plaster and paint it over. It will be safe and out of sight. Amenemhat hesitated. But the pharaoh's orders, the pharaoh wants the temple to be restored, Senenmut said, his voice persuasive. He does not want it to collapse and be lost forever. This is the best way to preserve it. Amenemhat considered his words. He knew Senenmut was taking a risk, but he also knew that he was a respected official. All right, he said finally. We will do as you say. Senenmut breathed a sigh of relief. He had managed to save one small piece of Hatshepsut's legacy. He watched as the workers carefully plastered over the relief, concealing it from view. He knew that it was only a temporary solution, but it was better than nothing. His secret actions did not go unnoticed. Rumors of his subtle defiance began to circulate, reaching the ears of Thutmose III's advisors. They warned the pharaoh that Senenmut could not be trusted, that he was still loyal to Hatshepsut's memory. Thutmose III, initially dismissive, began to pay closer attention to Senenmut's activities. He assigned spies to follow him, to monitor his movements, to report on his conversations. Senenmut realized he was being watched. He became more cautious, more discreet in his actions. He knew that his life was in danger, but he could not bring himself to stop. He felt a profound responsibility to protect Hatshepsut's legacy, to ensure that her story was not completely erased. He began to work in secret at night, away from the prying eyes of the palace. He commissioned artists to create small hidden statues of Hatshepsut, which he then buried in remote locations throughout Egypt. He wrote secret scrolls, documenting Hatshepsut's accomplishments and defending her reign. He hid these scrolls in sealed chambers, hoping that one day they would be discovered and the truth would be revealed. He entrusted these secret tasks to a select few individuals whom he deeply trusted, artisans and scribes, who had also served Hatshepsut and shared his sense of loss and injustice. He swore them to secrecy, warning them of the dire consequences of betrayal. One of these individuals was a young scribe named Nefertari. She had worked in the royal archives during Hatshepsut's reign, and she had witnessed firsthand the queen's intelligence and dedication. She was fiercely loyal to Hatshepsut, and she was eager to help Senenmut in his efforts to preserve her memory. Nefertari helped Senenmut to copy and hide the secret scrolls. She used her knowledge of the royal archives to access restricted documents and to gather information about Hatshepsut's reign. She was a skilled and resourceful ally, and Senenmut came to rely on her heavily. As the years passed, the campaign to erase Hatshepsut from history intensified. Thutmose III ordered the destruction of all remaining statues and images of the queen. He even went so far as to order the desecration of her tomb, removing her sarcophagus and replacing it with his own. Senenmut watched in despair as Hatshepsut's legacy was systematically dismantled. He felt as if he were living in a nightmare, witnessing the destruction of everything he held dear. Despite the overwhelming odds, he refused to give up. He continued to work in secret, to hide the truth, to preserve Hatshepsut's memory. He knew that he was risking his life, but he felt that it was a risk worth taking. One night, as he was burying a small statue of Hatshepsut near the Valley of the Kings, he was discovered by a group of soldiers. They had been tipped off by one of his former allies, a man who had succumbed to fear and betrayed him to the pharaoh. Senenmut was arrested and taken to the palace. He was thrown into a dungeon, where he was interrogated and tortured. He refused to reveal the location of the hidden statues and scrolls. He remained defiant, even in the face of death. Thutmose III was furious. He summoned Senenmut to the throne room, his face contorted with rage. "You have betrayed me, Senenmut," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You have defied my orders. You have attempted to undermine my authority." Senenmut stood before the pharaoh, his body bruised and bloodied, his spirit unbroken. "I have only served the truth, your majesty," he said, his voice clear and strong. "Hatshepsut was a great ruler, and her legacy deserves to be remembered." "You are a traitor," Thutmose III said. "You will be punished for your crimes." He paused, considering Senenmut's fate. "I will not grant you the mercy of a swift death. Your defiance will be your tomb. You will be sealed alive within one of Hatshepsut's unfinished monuments, a forgotten testament to your queen. Let the sands be your shroud." And with that, Senenmut's world dissolved into an abyss of echoing stone. Senenmut adjusted the heavy wig, the weight a constant reminder of his elevated status and the ever-present danger it carried. The air in the workshop hung thick with the scent of crushed limestone and pigment. He watched as the sculptor, a nervous man named Beck, meticulously applied the final touches to the miniature statue. It was Hatshepsut, depicted not as a powerful pharaoh with a false beard, but as a graceful woman, her features soft and serene. This was the image Senenmut wanted to preserve, the woman he had served, not the king history was determined to rewrite. "Ensure the pigments are thoroughly mixed," Senenmut instructed, his voice low. "The sun must not fade her smile too quickly." Beck nodded, his eyes wide with fear. He knew the risks involved, the consequences of being caught creating images of the banished queen. But Senenmut had a way of inspiring loyalty, or perhaps it was just fear of a different kind. He paid well, and he promised protection, a protection that was becoming increasingly difficult to provide. The statue was small enough to be concealed easily, a replica of a larger, now destroyed work that had once stood in the courtyard of Deir el-Bahari. Senenmut planned to place it within the tomb of a minor official, a man who had served Hatshepsut faithfully and had died before the purges began. He had subtly altered the tomb's design during its construction, adding a small secret chamber where the statue could reside, unnoticed by the overseers who now patrolled the necropolis. Weeks turned into months, each day a tightrope walk. Senenmut used his position as overseer of works to subtly delay the destruction of Hatshepsut's monuments. He would discover structural weaknesses that needed reinforcing, order unnecessary repairs, and generally slow the pace of the iconoclasm. His colleagues, men who had once been his friends, now eyed him with suspicion. Whispers followed him through the halls of the palace, accusations of lingering loyalty, of questionable allegiance. Thutmose III, ever vigilant, had increased his surveillance. Royal guards now shadowed Senenmut's movements, their presence a constant pressure. He knew he was being watched, his every action scrutinized for signs of dissent. Yet he could not stop. The burning need to preserve Hatshepsut's memory consumed him, a fire that threatened to engulf him entirely. He met with artists and scribes in secret, sharing sketches and texts, commissioning them to create hidden tributes to Hatshepsut. A bas-relief depicting Hatshepsut's Punt expedition was subtly incorporated into the tomb of a wealthy merchant, cleverly disguised within the larger narrative of the merchant's own life. A papyrus scroll recounting Hatshepsut's achievements was buried within the foundations of a new granary, its words hidden beneath layers of brick and mortar. Each act was a gamble, a risk that could cost him his life. But with each success, Senenmut felt a surge of defiance, a refusal to let Hatshepsut be erased. He was a single man against an empire, armed only with his wit, his position, and his unwavering loyalty. The turning point came with the tomb of Amenemhat, a high-ranking priest who had been a close confidant of Hatshepsut. Amenemhat's tomb was lavish, its walls covered in intricate paintings and hieroglyphs. It was the perfect place to hide a substantial tribute to the queen, a large statue depicting her offering incense to Amen-Ra. Senenmut oversaw the placement of the statue himself, working under the cover of darkness. He chose a location deep within the tomb, behind a false wall that he had secretly constructed. The statue was heavy, requiring several men to move it, each of them sworn to secrecy. The risk was immense, but the potential reward, a lasting testament to Hatshepsut's reign, was worth it. But Thutmose III's spies were everywhere. A disgruntled worker, envious of the wealth Senenmut commanded, betrayed him. He informed the royal guard of Senenmut's activities, revealing the secret chamber and the hidden statue. The raid was swift and brutal. As Senenmut and his men were securing the false wall, the tomb was stormed by royal guards. The workers scattered, fleeing in terror, but Senenmut stood his ground, his face a mask of defiance. He was arrested immediately, his hands bound behind his back. The guards dragged him through the streets of Thebes, the jeers and insults of the crowd ringing in his ears. He was taken to the palace, where he was thrown into a dark, damp cell, awaiting the judgment of Thutmose III. The interrogation was relentless. Thutmose III, his face contorted with rage, demanded to know the extent of Senenmut's treachery. He accused him of treason, of undermining the stability of the kingdom, of defying the will of the gods. "You have betrayed me," Senenmut, Thutmose III roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I trusted you, and you repaid me with deceit. Why? Why would you risk everything for a woman who has been banished from history?" Senenmut remained silent, his eyes fixed on Thutmose III. He would not betray Hatshepsut, even in the face of death. He had known this day might come, and he had prepared himself for it. "Speak," Thutmose III commanded, his fist slamming on the table. "Tell me who else is involved. Who helped you with your treasonous schemes?" Senenmut refused to answer. He would not implicate anyone else, not the artists, not the scribes, not the workers who had risked their lives to help him. He would bear the full weight of his actions alone. Thutmose III, frustrated by Senenmut's silence, ordered him to be tortured. The guards dragged him to the torture chamber, where he was subjected to unimaginable pain. But still, he did not break. He remained steadfast in his loyalty to Hatshepsut, his silence a testament to her enduring power. After days of torture, Thutmose III realized that Senenmut would never betray Hatshepsut. He was a man of unwavering conviction, a man who would rather die than betray his queen. Thutmose III, his anger tempered by a grudging respect, decided to change his tactics. He offered Senenmut a deal: confess his crimes, denounce Hatshepsut, and pledge allegiance to Thutmose III. In exchange, he would be spared his life and allowed to retain his position. Senenmut considered the offer. He knew that by accepting it, he could save himself from further suffering. But he also knew that by doing so, he would be betraying Hatshepsut's memory. He would be validating Thutmose III's attempt to erase her from history. He looked Thutmose III in the eye and spoke, his voice weak but firm. "I will not denounce Hatshepsut. She was a great pharaoh, a wise and just ruler. She brought prosperity and peace to Egypt. I am proud to have served her, and I will not betray her memory even to save my own life." Thutmose III, his face a mask of cold fury, sentenced Senenmut to death. But instead of a swift execution, he devised a more cruel and symbolic punishment. Senenmut would be sealed alive within one of Hatshepsut's unfinished monuments at Deir el-Bahri. The monument was a vast, unfinished structure, a testament to Hatshepsut's ambition and Senenmut's architectural genius. It was meant to be a lasting tribute to her reign, but now it would become her tomb, and Senenmut's as well. Senenmut was taken to Deir el-Bahri, surrounded by royal guards. The workers who had once admired him now averted their gaze, their faces filled with fear and pity. He was led into the heart of the unfinished monument, to a chamber that had been intended to house a statue of Hatshepsut. The chamber was small and airless, its walls rough and unfinished. The air hung heavy with the scent of stone and dust. Senenmut knew that he would not survive long in this place. As the guards began to seal the entrance to the chamber, Senenmut asked for a final request. He asked for a chisel and a hammer. Thutmose III, amused by the request, granted it. Senenmut took the chisel and hammer and began to carve into the wall of the chamber. He carved a final tribute to Hatshepsut, a depiction of her as a powerful pharaoh, her face radiating wisdom and strength. He carved her name in hieroglyphs, ensuring that it would never be forgotten. He knew that the monument would eventually crumble, that the walls would eventually collapse, but he also knew that his carvings would survive, that they would be discovered by future generations. And when they were, Hatshepsut's story would be told again. As the last stone was placed in the entrance, sealing him in the chamber, Senenmut smiled. He had failed to save Hatshepsut's reign, but he had succeeded in preserving her memory. He had defied Thutmose III's attempt to erase her from history. He closed his eyes and waited for the darkness to consume him. Time became meaningless. The air grew stale, the silence deafening. Senenmut's body weakened, his mind began to wander. He dreamt of Hatshepsut, of their shared triumphs and their secret sorrows. He remembered the day they first met, when he was a young apprentice and she was a princess, full of fire and ambition. He remembered the years they spent working together, building monuments, commissioning artwork, and shaping the destiny of Egypt. He remembered their shared vision of a prosperous and peaceful kingdom, a vision that had been shattered by Thutmose III's thirst for power. He knew that he would soon die, but he did not regret his actions. He had lived a life of purpose, a life of service to Hatshepsut, and he had died defending her memory. In his final moments, Senenmut felt a sense of peace. He had done all that he could. He had fought against the darkness, and he had left behind a spark of light. The spark of light would eventually ignite, revealing the truth about Hatshepsut's reign and the man who refused to let her be forgotten. His defiance became her enduring echo. He understood, even at the end, he was being acted upon. His agency surrendered to a larger political calculation. The crushing weight of irreversible consequence settled around him as the final stone slid into place. The tomb, once a symbol of Hatshepsut's ambition, became Senenmut's prison, a testament to the chilling effectiveness of absolute power. Senenmut stood before Thutmose III, the golden uraeus on the pharaoh's brow gleaming under the harsh desert sun. The accusation of treason hung heavy in the air, thicker than the incense that occasionally wafted from the nearby temple complex. He had been apprehended in the dead of night, placing a small, exquisitely carved statue of Hatshepsut within a newly constructed tomb, a hidden sanctuary amidst the sprawling necropolis. The guards, ever vigilant, had been thorough in their discovery. Thutmose III's gaze was a glacial force, capable of freezing the very Nile in its course. Senenmut, he began, his voice a low rumble that echoed with the weight of his authority. You stand accused of the gravest of crimes, defiance of the pharaoh and subversion against the rightful order of Maat. Do you deny these charges? Senenmut met his gaze unflinchingly, his heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs. He could lie, plead ignorance, feign madness, but such tactics were futile. Thutmose III was not a fool. He was a warrior, a shrewd strategist, and he knew Senenmut better than most. Years of service, of shared confidences and strategic counsel could not be erased, nor could the deep bond Senenmut had shared with Hatshepsut. I do not deny them, Pharaoh, Senenmut replied, his voice firm despite the tremor that threatened to betray his fear. I served Hatshepsut. I believed in her vision for Egypt, and I sought to preserve her memory, as any loyal servant would. A flicker of something akin to disappointment crossed Thutmose III's face, quickly replaced by the mask of regal impassivity. Loyalty to a usurper, to a woman who defied the very gods by assuming the throne that was rightfully mine? You call this loyalty, Senenmut? This is treason, plain and simple. Hatshepsut was no usurper, Senenmut retorted, his voice rising slightly in defiance. She ruled with wisdom and strength. Under her reign, Egypt prospered as never before. Trade flourished, monuments were erected, and the people were content. She brought peace and prosperity to this land, and she did so with the blessing of Amen himself. Thutmose III's eyes narrowed. Blasphemy. Amen does not bestow the pharaoh's crown upon a woman. The divine order dictates that the throne belongs to a man, a warrior, a leader who can defend Egypt against her enemies. Hatshepsut's rule was an anomaly, a disruption of the natural order, and it is my duty to restore that order, to erase the stain of her reign from the annals of history. Erase her name, deface her statues, destroy her monuments, Senenmut countered, his voice laced with bitterness. But you cannot erase her legacy. You cannot erase the good she did for Egypt. You cannot erase the love and respect she earned from her people. I can try, Thutmose III said, his voice cold as the desert night, and I will succeed. Your actions, Senenmut, are a testament to the lingering influence of her false reign. You have chosen to defy me, to cling to the memory of a queen who should be forgotten. For this you must pay the price. Senenmut braced himself for the inevitable. Death would be a release, a reunion with Hatshepsut in the afterlife. But he refused to beg for mercy, to betray the principles he had lived by. What is your judgment, Pharaoh? Senenmut asked, his voice calm and steady. Thutmose III considered him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He could order Senenmut's execution, have him drawn and quartered or impaled upon a stake. But such a death would be too quick, too merciful. He needed a punishment that would serve as a warning to others, a symbol of the futility of resistance. I will not grant you the release of a swift death, Senenmut, Thutmose III finally declared, his voice dripping with icy contempt. Instead, you will be entombed alive, within one of Hatshepsut's unfinished monuments, at Deir el-Bahari. You will have the chance to contemplate your loyalty, as the sands of time bury you completely. A gasp rippled through the assembled crowd of courtiers and guards. To be buried alive was a fate worse than death, a slow and agonizing descent into oblivion. But Senenmut showed no sign of fear. He accepted his sentence with stoic dignity. So be it, Pharaoh, Senenmut said, his voice echoing with a quiet resolve. I will embrace my fate, knowing that I served a great queen and that her memory will live on, long after you and I are both forgotten. The guards seized Senenmut, binding his hands and feet. They led him away from the palace, through the bustling streets of Thebes, and across the Nile towards the towering cliffs of Deir el-Bahari. The sun beat down mercilessly upon him, as he was dragged towards the magnificent temple complex he had helped to design and build. The temple, dedicated to Hatshepsut and the gods, stood as a testament to her ambition and vision. But now, it would become Senenmut's tomb. He was led into the heart of the unfinished structure, into a small, unadorned chamber deep within the rock face. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. The guards shoved him into the chamber, roughly untying his bonds. They placed a small jar of water and a loaf of bread beside him, a meager provision for his final journey. Then, without a word, they sealed the entrance to the chamber with heavy stone blocks, plunging him into absolute darkness. Senenmut stood alone in the suffocating silence, his mind racing. He could scream, shout, rage against his fate, but he knew it was futile. No one would hear him. No one would come to his rescue. He was sealed within this tomb, condemned to die a slow and agonizing death. But as the darkness enveloped him, Senenmut felt a sense of peace settle over him. He was not afraid. He had lived a full life, a life dedicated to serving Hatshepsut and to honoring the gods. And now, he would die a martyr for his beliefs. He took a deep breath, savoring the last taste of air in his lungs. Then he began to feel around in the darkness, searching for something to occupy his mind, to distract him from the gnawing hunger and thirst that would soon consume him. His hands brushed against the rough stone wall of the chamber. An idea sparked in his mind. He had no tools, no chisel, no ink or papyrus, but he had his fingers and he had the wall. With trembling hands, Senenmut began to carve into the stone, using his fingernails as his only implements. It was a painstaking task, slow and arduous, but he persevered, driven by a burning desire to leave behind a lasting tribute to Hatshepsut. He carved her name, her titles, her accomplishments. He depicted her triumphs in war and her achievements in peace. He recounted her wisdom and her compassion. He immortalized her in stone, ensuring that her memory would endure, even if her statues and monuments were destroyed. As the hours turned into days, Senenmut's strength began to wane. His fingers were raw and bleeding, his body racked with hunger and thirst, but he refused to stop. He continued to carve, driven by the knowledge that he was the last hope for preserving Hatshepsut's legacy. Finally, with his last ounce of strength, he completed his task. He had filled the entire wall with his carvings, a testament to his love and devotion. Then he collapsed to the ground, his body weak and exhausted. He closed his eyes and waited for death to claim him. As his life ebbed away, he smiled. He had done his duty. He had honored Hatshepsut, and he had ensured that her memory would live on, long after he was gone. Centuries passed. The temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari fell into disrepair, its once gleaming white facade weathered and cracked by the relentless desert sun. The sands of time crept in, burying the monument beneath layers of sediment. Hatshepsut's name was largely erased from official records, her statues defaced and her cartouches removed from monuments. Thutmose III's campaign to obliterate her memory had been largely successful, but whispers of a female pharaoh lingered in the collective memory of Egypt, passed down through generations of storytellers and historians. And hidden within the heart of Deir el-Bahari, Senenmut's carvings waited patiently to be rediscovered. In the 19th century, archaeologists began to excavate the ruins of Deir el-Bahari, slowly uncovering the forgotten temple of Hatshepsut. They meticulously cleared away the sand and debris, revealing the magnificent structure that had been hidden for centuries. As they delved deeper into the temple complex, they stumbled upon a small, sealed chamber. With great anticipation, they broke through the stone blocks, eager to see what lay within. What they found astonished them. The walls of the chamber were covered in intricate carvings, depicting a female pharaoh in all her glory. They recognized her immediately as Hatshepsut, the queen who had been erased from history. The carvings revealed the truth about Hatshepsut's reign, her accomplishments, and her contributions to Egypt. They told the story of a wise and powerful ruler who had brought peace and prosperity to the land. And they told the story of Senenmut, the loyal servant who had risked his life to preserve her memory. His carvings were a testament to his love and devotion, a lasting tribute to the queen he had served so faithfully. The discovery of Senenmut's carvings sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. It shattered the official narrative that had been propagated for centuries, revealing the truth about Hatshepsut's reign and Thutmose III's attempt to erase her from history. Hatshepsut was once again recognized as a legitimate pharaoh, a ruler who had made a significant contribution to Egyptian history. Her statues were restored, her cartouches were re-engraved, and her name was added back to the official records. Senenmut's actions, though ultimately resulting in his death, had ensured that Hatshepsut's legacy was not completely lost. His carvings had served as a beacon of truth, guiding future generations to the forgotten story of a remarkable queen. Today, the Temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari stands as a monument to her achievements and to the courage of Senenmut, the man who refused to let her be forgotten. Visitors from around the world come to marvel at her magnificent temple and to learn about her extraordinary life. They walk through the colonnades, admiring the intricate carvings and the towering statues. They read the inscriptions that recount her triumphs and her wisdom, and they remember Senenmut, the loyal servant who risked everything to ensure that her story would be told. The restoration of Hatshepsut's image was not immediate. For decades after the discovery, the political implications of a female pharaoh were debated, interpretations shifting with societal biases. Some saw her reign as an aberration, a temporary blip in the otherwise patriarchal lineage of Egyptian rulers. Others, inspired by burgeoning feminist ideals, celebrated her as a powerful and independent woman who defied the limitations imposed by her time. The decipherment of hieroglyphs was a painstaking process, and the full scope of Senenmut's hidden carvings only became clear years after their initial discovery. Academics argued over the motivations behind Thutmose III's erasure campaign. Was it purely political, a consolidation of power after a co-regency, or was there a deeper, more personal animosity driving his actions? The lack of definitive evidence left room for speculation, fueling endless debates within academic circles. The physical restoration of Hatshepsut's monuments was a slow and laborious task. Fragments of statues were pieced together, missing sections were painstakingly recreated, and defaced inscriptions were carefully re-engraved. The process was fraught with challenges, requiring a delicate balance between preserving the original structure and making it accessible to modern visitors. The impact of Hatshepsut's rediscovery extended beyond the realm of academia. Her story resonated with people from all walks of life, offering a glimpse into a world where women could rise to positions of power and influence. She became a symbol of female empowerment, inspiring artists, writers, and activists to challenge traditional gender roles. Despite the efforts to restore Hatshepsut's image, the scars of Thutmose III's erasure campaign remained visible. Many of her statues were still missing their faces, her cartouches were still partially defaced, and her name was still omitted from some historical records. These remnants served as a reminder of the fragility of memory and the enduring power of those who seek to control the narrative. In the end, the story of Hatshepsut and Senenmut became a testament to the enduring power of truth. Even in the face of overwhelming opposition, their legacy persisted, waiting to be rediscovered by future generations. Their story serves as a reminder that history is not a fixed and immutable record, but a constantly evolving narrative shaped by the perspectives and interpretations of those who seek to understand the past. A modern-day visitor stands before the restored temple of Hatshepsut, gazing in awe at the towering colonnades and the intricate carvings. They read the inscriptions that tell the story of a remarkable queen who ruled Egypt with wisdom and strength, and they pause to reflect on the dedication of Senenmut, the man who refused to let her be forgotten. The silence of the desert holds the echo of a queen,